once again to another edition of the Basement Show After Dark. Today I have a special guest on the show. I'd like for her to introduce herself.
My name is Anternitia O'Neal.
How you doing, Anternitia? It's good to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Nice meeting you. So are you from Cincinnati?
Yes.
Born and raised?
Yes, born and raised in Cincinnati.
Okay. So, I see you got your lovely son. How many children do you have?
I have 4 sons.
Okay. So how is this? Okay, I'm just gonna go right into this. And for a lot of people who don't know, Antonita's son was shot by Cincinnati police. I'm gonna let you just go ahead and tell, like, what happened that night when your son was killed by the police.
My son was murdered November the 21st, 2012 at around 5:44 p.m. on Burton Avenue in Cincinnati, Ohio. The officer that murdered my son was Officer Orlando Smith. Apparently they were trying to pull my son over, and as my son pulled over, they were trying to get the guy that was in my son's car out of the car. Apparently they were looking for him. So, but that guy that they were apparently looking for had been outside, the whole time, all day, until before my son even came out there to get him. So, it was my son and 2 other guys in the car. One of the guys got out of the car and ran. Per stated by Police Officer Orlando Smith, the guy that ran, posted ahead, took a shot at the police officer and threw the gun and ran. Okay, and then I guess they let him run and didn't try to chase after him or whatnot. I don't think so. So, however, the cops, Orlando Smith, came over there to my son's car. My son was sitting in the driver's side awaiting arrest. Mm-hmm. The guy, Robert Matthews, that was sitting in the back seat of my son's car, got out the car with his hands up, putting his hands up, awaiting arrest. Mm-hmm. The police came over there and shot him 2 times in the forearm. And after he shot him twice, he opened fire on my son, shooting him 14 times.
Wow. Now this was the one officer. How many officers was doing the actual shooting?
One officer was doing the shooting. And
he shot the guy that was in the back.
Officer Orlando Smith shot Robert Matthews. There were 2 other cops with Orlando Smith. Okay. The other 2 cops never shot their gun or anything. Right. So Orlando Smith tells the story that my son got out the car and took a shot at the police officer and got back in the car. Okay, so if that was the case, why didn't the other 2 cops that was with Officer Orlando Smith defend Orlando Smith from these guys that was apparently supposed to have been shooting at them, which was my son, per Orlando Smith? Okay, however, the other 2 cops never shot their gun. Orlando Smith was the only one shooting. He came, and the way that the coroner stated that the gunshot wounds traveled, he was up on my son. Okay. So and my son was in a sitting position inside of the car. So the bullet that were interesting, per coroner stated, because she never seen a bullet travel in that manner, my son had to been sitting in a sitting position where the cop came up on my son and shot him point range, shooting him in the head, shooting him in the chest, and the bullet that traveled went down into his aorta and down into his pelvic area and hit a main artery. So in order for a bullet to travel in that manner, you had to be sitting in the sitting position for it to be lodged right there in the pelvic area where that main artery is, around where your femur is.
So the coroner is stating that based on what the coroner report is, that they believe that he had to have been sitting or and in a low position for the bullet to travel the way that it did.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
And there were, I guess, it was a whole lot of people outside. So we have
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
I didn't mean to cut you off, but I was going to ask, before I even go to the part about the witness, let's back up for a second. So what led up to this incident? What was it that brought this whole thing to this point?
Well, I guess the guy that ran, which his name is Gary Branner, he was the one that ran out of my son's car.
Okay.
Um.
Now, was he the one, because in this, they have a report that the police was doing a undercover drug bust or something like that. That's what they reported.
Okay, so apparently the undercovers were apparently looking for Robert Matthews. He was one of the guys that was in my son's car. So my son had just came out the Avondale to pick Bobby. They call him Bobby. His name is Robert Matthews. Came out there to pick him up. So I guess earlier that day, or I don't know when, stated by Orlando Smith that they were looking for Robert Matthews. Okay, but my whole thing is, for one, the police jeopardized my son's life anyway. First of all, because if you had been looking for this guy, Robert Matthews, he had been outside in Avondale all that day. So why did you wait until he got into my son's car to try to pursue arrest? So at that time, they were jeopardizing my son's life, because soon as he gets in my son's car, I say probably not even a half a mile down the street, they stopped my son's car on Burton Avenue, Reading Road, where he was turning on Burton Avenue to get pulled over, because the sirens, I guess the police had the sirens or whatnot on. So as my son were, trying to find somewhere to park so that he can, I guess, stop for the police or whatnot, the guy that was in the front seat, which was Gary Brenner, got out the car.
That's the guy they were looking for.
No, the guy that they were looking for was in the back seat.
Okay.
So why did Gary Brenner get out the car? I'm not sure why he got out the car and started running. So the police stated that he got the guy that was in the front seat, which was Gary Brenner, got out the car, started running. Supposedly he had took a shot at the police, threw the gun, and ran. If this guy had shot at the police, their focus would have never been on my son's car. They would have continued to try to get this guy that took the shot at the police officer.
So no police went in pursuit after that guy when he shot and ran off?
No, unless they start calling other police out. But at that time, no. My whole thing is, why didn't you go after that guy? Even if you were looking for the boy that was in my son's car, why didn't you go out looking for that guy that took a shot at the police and ran, supposedly? Your focus wouldn't have been never on my son anymore. Your whole focus would have been on trying to get this boy that can't even run, because he got like rods and stuff or whatnot, like in his legs. He can't even run. He walked like as if he had like a prosthetic leg, due to, I guess, some other injuries that he suffered, throughout the past. So he couldn't have never got far. So the whole thing is, Orlando Smith went, I guess, said, forget that boy that ran, and went towards my son's car, just started open firing.
Like I said, I don't know exactly what took place there, because what did the witness say? Because they got that the suspect vehicle accelerated backwards towards the police officer.
Well, that was the police witness that was the police statement. They took and said that my son, as he pulled over, my son backed up and tried to hit I guess hit an unmarked police car. So he never hit a police car. I guess it was an unmarked, a car that was just parked on the street. So I guess he was trying to like back up or whatnot, and he tapped the car, I guess, a little bit. My son never hit no police officer at all.
So
that story that they stated was falsified.
Okay, so that's the story so basically what their police are trying to say is that he had backed the car towards them, and then that's why they shot. Is that what they're trying to say?
Well, he tried to say that the reason why he shot my son is because my son got out the car and started shooting at him.
So if that's the case, so then was there a weapon found by your son?
There was no weapon found by my son. I have discovery and everything. They did not put the pictures. Usually in discovery, they put the photos and everything, and especially if it's a police shooting and a gun was supposed to have been, what's a gun that my son supposedly, Orlando Smith stated, was used to try to shoot at that cop.
Right.
They would have put everything out in discovery. But no, Orlando Smith stated that he thought that my son would have shot at him. He thought that he would have had a gun. So that's why he started shooting at my son.
So wait a minute. So there was no gun found?
It was no gun found at all.
So where did they come from with the .45 caliber?
The .45 caliber, okay, there were supposed to have been two guns that Cincinnati police stated that they found. Okay, the .45 caliber was actually the gun that they said that the boy that was in the front seat of my son's car that got out the car and ran shot with.
But that's the one that fired the shot that supposedly had threw the gun after he ran. Okay.
Yeah. So if my son, it doesn't make any type of sense, because the boy that ran out my son's car that never even seen the shooting, he was not even there when the shooting took place because he ran out the car. So he apparently supposed to have the .45 caliber. So my whole thing is, if he had the .45 caliber and ran and threw that gun in the woods, how did my son shoot that same gun, a .45 caliber, at the police officer as well? It doesn't make sense.
It is kind of.
It doesn't make sense.
So the .45 caliber that the police have, is this your son prints on it?
No, my son did not have no gun residue powder on his hands. My son did not have no fingerprints or whatever. I mean, of course, if he didn't have the gun, so he never had gunpowder residue on his hands. However, they stated that my son had gunpowder residue on his body. Of course, you're gonna have gunpowder residue on your body if you're gunned down. So even if someone else that was right there in the same vicinity or whatnot, and a police is shooting or anyone shooting at that, a gun, will have gunpowder residue somewhere on their clothes, their body, or somewhere. Right. So that was the only gunpowder residue that my son had. Okay, on his body when he was gunned down. So my son didn't pass away right then and there. This happened at 5:44 p.m. So if you taking a gun and shooting at a person, their first normal humanly instinct would be to grab that wound wherever they're shot at, and then by him being shot in the heart, you're going to grasp that area anyway. So had my son, even if he did have gunpowder residue on his hands or whatnot, it wasn't gunpowder residue on his hands from him shooting a gun. They don't even have a gun that my son never even had a gun. So
the .45 caliber they have is from the one who ran, and his fingerprints are.
I don't even know who fingerprints or whatever is. If the Gary Branner fingerprints is on the gun, I don't know. If I know my son's fingerprints was never on the gun because my son never had a .45 caliber. Okay. So it doesn't make sense that the boy that ran was the one that had the .45 caliber. How are you going to put that on my son having a .45 caliber? Right. When my son was in the car and where the guy that got out the car he ran way before the shooting even started. Okay. So the only one that was shooting was Officer Orlando Smith. Okay. He was the only one shooting.
And how many officers was on the scene?
There were 3 officers on the scene. Okay. So no one else shot their gun but Orlando Smith. So you're meaning telling me that when you sworn in, you're supposed to defend your fellow officers. So if you had these boys shooting at this one cop and your other officers not defending you, they shouldn't be nowhere on the force. Right. Because they're not defending their fellow cop.
Now, so if I don't know how many squad cars was there? Do you know
I don't know how many squad cars was there. I guess as once everything started, taking place, I guess a lot of squad cars
But
were not
reason I
kept.
was asking because I was wondering because I know they all have the police. They got the video cameras in the car, so I was wondering based on how many cars was there that cameras could have been on.
Right. It was about, if I'm not mistaken, it was a few police cars there. Okay, so basically, Officer Orlando Smith stated that before the shooting, the video camera was working. Mm-hmm. Okay, during the shooting, as he was shooting at my son and shooting at, because he shot Bobby Robert Matthews 1st, mm-hmm. and then he opened fire on my son.
Okay, well, so you're saying at this point it's just kind of in a standstill.
So at this point it's in a standstill. I'm in the dark about everything. I'm frustrated. I'm very frustrated about it all. Not frustrated is not even the word, to just have my baby taken away from me, innocently taken away from me, and no one is like contacting me at all. Had this been a white cop, a Caucasian cop that killed my baby, it would have been everywhere. I would have had the African American leaders of Cincinnati, Ohio, and everyone else trying to help out with me. I'm very upset with the African American community because they state that they pro-black, they pro, this and pro that. They help out with this and help out with that. Why have no one came and helped me with my son's case? Because this officer is a black officer. Mm-hmm. To me, that's discrimination. That's discrimination. But like I said, had it been a white cop, it would have been nationwide. National.
Right. So, Orlando Smith's still on the force.
He's still on the force. He's still out, starting all type of trouble. This cop is a trouble cop. He has been a police officer since 1993. He has a long, extensive history of shooting. He done shot like 6 other, people, citizens before. Mm-hmm. He paralyzed a Devon Price arm. He was one of the guys that he shot at AutoZone in Avondale. He apparently thought that he was someone else, so he was mistaking him from someone else and shot him and paralyzed his arm. He beat Nathaniel Livingston up, broke bones in his legs and foot. He's like a proactive, he also shot a 17-year-old boy back in like 1997 or 99 because his car was sticking out of the driveway. He also shot a guy named, I believe his name is Daryl Thomas. He shot him back in 96 or 97. I have all the information on that cop. So,
and when you saying that, playing devil's advocate, most of the people that will hear that would think, well, if this police officer done all of these shootings,
why is he still out here?
They would say, well, something has to be legit that he did it because he's still on the force. Because people would think, obviously, the Cincinnati police would not have an officer that is causing this many incidents still on the force.
I mean, I can't believe it. I can't believe it. They even honored that cop for killing my son May of last year, 2013. He was honored with medals. Downtown District 1 area, on the government square. He was honored for murdering my son. Supposedly he had took over 2 guys that, he was defending himself, and he took 2 guys down, fatally killing one, which was my son, and was actually honored with medals for killing my son.
Now, I want to go back before I could wrap this up. Witnesses. Was there witnesses there that, because at that, what time of day was that? Like 11?
It was 5:44 p.m. Yes, I have like 22 witnesses that seen everything, and each person that we spoke with, and this is the information that the police got themselves, the canvas reports, that they spoke with these witnesses, and we got the canvas report of them, and each witness that they spoke with never seen my son shoot a gun or no one else shoot. The only one was shooting was Orlando Smith.
you know, foreclosure, I guess for you, would be some type of trial and somebody found guilty of doing murdering your son would probably be what you would want to see happen. Because like you said, filing a suit against the city for a monetary gain, money is not what you're aiming for here. Is you want to see some type
I
of
want justice for my son. I want justice for my son. He murdered my baby. He took my son away from me, from his kids. He even had a son born 2 days after he was murdered prematurely. They never got to see their dad. He had another son also born a month after he passed, and then he had a son that was only 8 months when he passed. So, this has been, it has been taken a big toll on myself, my other boys. We just going through it. And, they try to stereotype African Americans and just try to make them look as if they're these big drug dealers and, oh, he was selling drugs, or, oh, there was a drug bust or drugs thing, so forget him. No, that's not the case at all. He shot my son, like I said, they wasn't even looking for my child. He jeopardized my baby life just by even waiting to arrest the guy that my son picked up. Waited till he got in my son's car to, do all this drugs thing or whatever. They were trying to get the boy from my son's car or whatever. They violated and jeopardized my son's life in so many different ways and took my son's life. And like I said before, the other 2 cops, I got everything from discovery to what the police and them stated from the interview that was done by my attorney, the one-on-one interview that was done with Orlando Smith, and that's like 40-something pages long or whatever. And he admitted that he shot my son. He thought that he would have shot at him, or thought that he did have a gun. You can't assume anything. And it's just, it's irreversible. It's irreversible. And I want this cop, I want him accountable, to be held accountable for his actions.
Well, I'm glad you came on the show again. Glad you came on to tell the story. Thank y'all for tuning in. Hopefully we'll hear some more about this case down the road in the future. And until then, keep watching the Basement Show After Dark.